skunk. I can't come to church like that. And I said, brother, there's people that have showered that smell like a skunk, so come on. Jason raised his hand. I wasn't going to call you out, Jason, but you boys, you may be seated this evening. So good to see everyone again in the house of the Lord. And we want to give Pastor Dave all the time that he needs this evening. I'm thankful for our youth pastor, aren't you? He does a wonderful job, not only with the youth group, but with anything that I ask him to do. And, pastoring a church and working in a church is certainly not a 9-to-5 job. It's 24 hours a day, and if I ever need him, he is there. Would you give him one more hand as he comes to minister the word tonight, Pastor Dave?
It's great to be in the house of the Lord. It's even greater to be able to speak God's word. It's not a calling for everyone. God doesn't call everyone. But I am glad that he has called me, and it's always an honor to be able to speak his word. And so tonight I have a word for you, and it came to me during marriage retreat. No, it's not about marriage, all right? I'm not going to get up here and talk to you about marriage, but a couple weeks ago, a lot of us couples were at marriage retreat, and one of the nights we had a date night. And so after dinner, while most of the couples went to bed, I didn't know that I went to marriage retreat with a bunch of old people, but a bunch of them went to bed. And me and Sister Jess said, well, it's too early to go to bed. And so we were looking around to figure out what we could do. I know some had talked about going putt-putt, and me and Jess have been wanting to go to this certain place that does axe throwing. Has anybody here done axe throwing before? All right. It is something that I hated. All right. I just flat out hated it. It was the most frustrating game that I have ever participated in, ever played in. And some of you have seen me golf, and so it was even way worse than how I golf. But it was very frustrating. And so when we got there, there was this gentleman, and he was like, is this your first time? And I was like, yes, this is my first time axe throwing. He was like, all right, it's going to be the easiest thing that you ever do. He's like, I want you to go up to this line, and I want you to throw the axe over your head, because that's totally easy, with a metal object that's sharp flying over your head. But he was like, it's the easiest thing we're going to do. You're going to go to this line, you're going to toss it, and you're going to try and hit the bullseye. And so as me and Jess began playing, it became very frustrating. Why? Because when we would throw the axe would not get stuck in the wood. And so what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to play 5 rounds. And after every throw, you tally up your score, and after the 5th round, you put a check mark next to the person's name because they won that round, whoever had the most points. And it became so frustrating because we scored 0 after 0 after 0 after 0 that me and Jess kind of just quit doing rounds. If we were able to get points, we celebrated, and we just put the points on the board. And so we didn't play exactly how it was supposed to be. But every throw that we did, it seemed just to bounce off of the wood. What was more frustrating was when you would sit back and you would watch the person next to us. There was a couple next to us, and they would be throwing it one-handed. They would be throwing it under their legs. They would be throwing it down here and trying to catch it. It was like they were the dude perfect of axe throwing, right? They were so good at it. Some person was throwing 2 axes at the same time. And so that's what made it even more frustrating, because why could I not do what they were doing? And so as we left that place that night, my pride was broken. And I was wondering if I would ever go axe throwing ever again. And so when we got to the hotel, I began Googling axe throwing because we were so bad about it. I had to know the secret. I had to know how to be good at axe throwing. That way, next time, if we ever had a young adult event or a church event, I could show y'all up, and I could put that in my past. And so I began to quickly read about axe throwing. And at the beginning, in the top page, it began and it said this, that you must have a sharp axe for the axe to be able to stick in the wood. So next time when I go axe throwing, I'm going to ask for them to sharpen the axe right in front of me so that way I know that it's sharp enough. But experiencing the lack of the sharp axe got me thinking about how many people in this world will tell you that ministry isn't as successful as it used to be. How churches used to be filled to the brim. How there were many conversions, many healings, and many deliverances. But now you can't get people to show up on a consistent basis. There's less stories of miraculous healings, and there's hardly any chains being broken. That more and more people are living shackled to things of this world. You see, tonight, if you have your Bibles, we turn to me with the book of 2 Kings. And we're going to be reading in chapter 6, starting with verse 1. And it begins reading, and it says this, the company of the prophets said to Elisha, look, the place where we meet with you is too small for us. You see, Elisha's ministry had been so successful, he had made such a significant impact that the place where he trained young men for the ministry was getting too small. That there were so many young men wanting to learn and be trained by this one man of God, that there were some older students that began to complain that it was getting a little too tight in there. They said, we can't even move in this place. We can't even breathe. Think about it, they didn't have air conditioning. Some of y'all have experienced no air conditioning this week. This was their daily life. They didn't have any air conditioning. And so they are packed in this building or area, and it is hard for them to breathe. And so some of these sons, some of these younger prophets, they get an idea. And they said, hey, we're tired of other people being all up in my Kool-Aid, right? I'm tired of people sitting in my lap. I'm tired of people being so close to me. Let's build a new place. And so that's what's going on. And so in verse 2, it goes on to say, it says, let us go down to the Jordan, where each of us can get a pole, and let us build a place there for us to meet. And he said, go. Then one of them said, won't you please come with your servants? And Elisha replied, I will. And he went with them. And they went to the Jordan, and they began to cut down trees. And as one of them was cutting down a tree, the iron axe head fell into the water. And the man cried out, oh no, my Lord. It was borrowed. And the man of God asked, where did it fall? And when he showed him the place, Elisha cut a stick, and he threw it there. And he made the iron float. Lift it out, Elisha said. Then the man reached out his hand, and he took it. Bow your heads with me. Dear Lord, right now I just pray, Lord, that you open every heart, mind, and soul to the word that you have for them this morning or this evening. Lord, I pray, Lord, that these be your words and not mine. Let me be an instrument, Lord, to your ministry here tonight. In your name we pray, amen. You see, you can really tell that these men, these young men, were not used to building things very often. You see, maybe some came from a background of carpentry, but most likely not. These men are young men. And so why do I say that? It's because this young man's axe head flies into the river, and he begins to panic. He's yelling at Elisha. He's saying, sir, I've lost my axe head, and it's not even mine. I borrowed it. I didn't pay for this. Meaning for this young man to help build this new building, he had to go and he had to find his own axe. That he didn't have one readily available. You see, iron in those days was available, but it wasn't in such a supply where it was cheap. So this man had every right to begin to panic. He was just a student. I've been there. I've been just a student. I didn't have very much money. And so this is the same feeling for this young man. He's a student. He didn't have any money to be able to pay back whoever he borrowed the axe from. And the other reason that we know that he wasn't used to cutting down trees was that he had forgotten the most important thing when handling an axe. He forgot to sharpen it. You see, the Bible mentions that they arrived at the Jordan, and the boys just start cutting down trees. You see, there isn't even a mention of anyone sitting down and sharpening their axes before they start. So this young man, he's cutting with a dull blade, which allows the axe to bounce off the tree instead of cut right into it, which then makes the axe head come loose and fly into the water. You see, the reason that churches lay empty, why we don't hear or experience miraculous healings or powerful deliverances, is because we have a church that is full of a bunch of dull axes. You see, many Christians today have just lost their axe head. You come in, you sit, and you hear a message that doesn't even resonate with your heart and your soul. That you come in and you sing lyrics on a screen. Then you go home and you live life wondering why you aren't inspired or motivated. You see, you forget sharpening the blade. Some of you have even lost your axe head completely. But tonight I want you to understand that there are signs that your axe head is getting dull. And if he would have known the signs, if this young man had known the signs, there was a possibility that he would have never lost the axe head in the first place. That he would have saved himself a lot of stress and heartache if he had only recognized that all he had to do was sit down, spend some time, and sharpen his axe. So tonight, what are the signs of that your axe is getting dull? You see, when your axe is getting dull, you have to use more strength. You see, in Ecclesiastes 10:10, it says, if the axe is dull and one does not sharpen its edge, then one must exert more strength. However, the advantage of wisdom is that it brings success. You see, when that man was demonstrating how to throw an axe to me and Jess, he told us that there was a possibility that the axe might bounce off of the wood and fly backwards at us. And so he said, because of that, I do not want you throwing it with all your might. He said, the harder that you throw it, the further back it bounces. And so I got so tired of looking and throwing that axe and it not sticking. And about halfway through, I told Jess, I was like, hey, don't you just want to leave? This ain't fun anymore. Are you ready to go? I'm not having fun. We're not scoring any points. We're getting embarrassed by the couple next to us. I was sweating. I was frustrated. You see, for what was such a simple task, I couldn't even do it. And it was at that point in time, the man from the couple beside us that was doing trick shots with his axe, he came up to us and he said, hey, let me give you a little secret. And I said, oh, thank you. You should see my scoreboard. He said, let me tell you a secret. He said, one, you're a big guy. He said, two, your axe might be dull. So he said, hey, I want you to back up from the line even further than what they told you to do. And then I want you to throw it as hard as you can at the piece of wood. And I'm thinking about this guy in the back of my head saying, hey, when it bounces, it's going to bounce about as hard as you throw it. And so I have this one guy tell me, don't throw it as hard as possible, and another guy saying, hey, throw it as hard as possible. But I did what that other guy told me because I was so frustrated and tired. I was like, all right, I'm going to throw this axe head as hard as I can. And I took a step back and I fired that axe, and it stuck in the wood. And for the rest of the night, me and Jess were throwing that axe as hard as we possibly could. And guess what? It was so hard that we had thrown the axe so many times that next morning at breakfast, we felt that we had gone axe throwing. You see, when your axe gets dull, it takes more strength to accomplish a task. You see, there was a warning sign for this young man who was chopping down trees. He must have noticed that the others were chopping down trees faster and more efficiently than he was. He must have noticed that he was a little bit more tired than the rest of them. But the man ignores him, ignores the signs, mostly likely out of ignorance. This man probably had never really chopped wood before, and he continues to chop down trees. You see, there are people in life that are finding it harder and harder to make it through the day. Finding it harder and harder to have patience. Finding it harder and harder to love. Finding it harder and harder to have joy. Finding it harder and harder to have self-control. That when someone comes up to you and asks the same question for the third time, you just blow up and you tell them, I've already told you that. You find it harder and harder to show goodness. That all those temptations and the past chains start rearing their ugly heads. Finding it harder and harder to be faithful. You say in yourself in the morning, I don't want to get up that extra hour and read my word and pray. I want that extra day just to be lazy on the weekends. You see, if that's you tonight, and it feels like it's taking all your strength just to get through the day, your axe may be dull tonight. That you have completely worn yourself out mentally, physically, emotionally, relationally, and spiritually. Because you will not set apart a time to sharpen your axe. You see, when was the last time you really asked God, God, what do you have for me this year? God, what is it that you want me to do for this year? God, what do you have for me this year? And you know, it shouldn't just be yearly. It shouldn't just be monthly, but daily. God, what fresh word do you have for me today? God, what fresh patience do you have for me today? Because you know, so-and-so gets on my nerves, so I'm going to need a little bit more patience. God, what fresh self-control do you have for me? Because today is Wednesday, and you know so-and-so likes to go to Subway, and he gets a bunch of onions, and he's one of those people that get in your face to talk. God, give me some fresh self-control. You see, here is a secret. The more that you do in the spiritual realm, the more that you pray, the more that you worship, the more that you read the word, the less you have to do in the physical. You see, the problem is that people don't even realize that the more and more that you swing that dull axe, maybe you're just trying to get through the day, that a dull axe will still cut things. You see, a dull axe will still cut some trees down. You see, a dull prayer life will still cut some trees down. A dull worship life will still defeat some giants. And that's the biggest issue, is that if it's still doing its job, then we don't take the time to sit down and worship and sharpen our axe. We don't stop and survey the condition of our axe. You see, there are people that continue to swing that dull axe more and more because guess what? It's working. I'm getting through the day, barely, but I'm getting through it. It's getting the job done. But they don't even realize that they're just one swing away from losing that axe head completely altogether. You see, when your axe head is dull, it takes more strength to accomplish a task. When your axe head is dull, you begin to reflect what you are going through. You see, I read something very interesting about testing the sharpness of a blade. So you can do this with knives, chisels, axes. And the test is that you would hang a light from above, and you would take your axe head and you would put it in the light, looking down. And when you look down, guess what? A sharp axe doesn't reflect light. That the end is so fine that the ray of light is split into two rays that are too small for the human eye to detect. But when you place a dull edge under a blade, some of the light gets reflected off the flat portion of the edge, causing light to be seen. You see, in life, there are going to be times where you have to cut pretty big trees down. In life, there are going to be times where you have to cut down some huge giants. And if your axe head is dull, it won't just be reflecting light, but you will be reflecting to others the damage of what you are going through. You see, I'm the one of the worst at this. I don't know if anybody else has been there where you go through a day and you are completely done. You're overwhelmed and you have no idea what to do next. Maybe it was a diagnosis. Maybe it was something that happened to you or someone that you know. Maybe it was a situation at work. Maybe it was a financial situation that you get so overwhelmed that you do not know what to do. You see, a couple of weeks ago, me and Jess we were driving. We were supposed to do something, maybe do some errands or something. And so we were driving, and we were passing all the places where we were supposed to go. And Jess was like, where are we going? Because you know that we have the stuff to do. And I kind of lashed out to Jess. I said, I'm done. I'm done with today. Let's just go home. We can do it another day. And I know I'm painting myself in a bad light, but has anybody ever else felt like that? I'm done. I can't do it anymore. You see, it was because I was dull that day that I was reflecting what I was going through. You see, I was tired. I was frustrated. I was done. I was angry. I was annoyed. If you could think of it, I was experiencing it. And so usually when Jess asked me about my day, I'm like, it was okay. It was good. I got through it. I can't complain. But I'm usually sharp. But that day I was dull. And that through the trees that I faced, usually what I would be able to cut right through, I could not cut right through them. That it began to reflect what I was going through. I was dull because I had been fighting that day. And because I was dull, I was reflecting what I was going through right onto Jess. You see, Matthew chapter 5 and verse 14 through 16 says this, you are the light of the world. A city situated on a hill cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and puts it in a basket, but rather on a lampstand and gives light for all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. You see, as Jesus was talking to his followers, he was trying to let the people know that no matter where you are in life, whether you're rich, whether you're poor, whether you're up, whether you're down, whether you're happy or whether you're sad, whether you're in shape, whether you are not, whether you are whether you are there mentally, whether you're not, that there is no point where you do not shine. You see, you can't say when I reach this number in my bank account, then I'm going to shine. You can't say when I'm healthy, I'm going to shine. You see, the truth is you are shining whether you think so or not. You are shining in every area of your life. And when you realize that it has nothing to do with your circumstances, but it is the light shining from up above, and it is our position as his children that we are always shining. Revelation 18:1 says that when he returns to the earth, the earth will be illuminated by his glory. Meaning that if he was shining then he is shining now because he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. So if he is always shining, then we are always reflecting light. You see, I mentioned earlier that in the light test that the blade splits the ray of light and it passes through the blade. But that doesn't mean that none of the light is reflected. It's just so small that our human eyes can't detect it. You see, when a blade has been warped or dull, the light that can be seen increases and the damage can be seen more clearly. Then what people see is what we are going through. They aren't seeing Jesus. The world should see God when they see you, and they should not see what you are going through. The world should see that you survived the worst seasons of your life. The world should see an overcomer. When they see you, and when people ask how come you can be so comfortable, I know what you're going through. I know that you're going through in time. How can you be so relaxed? How come you haven't cursed God and given up? You can reply, because I spent time sharpening my axe, that I just didn't swing it over and over again. I didn't swing with how sharp my axe was last year. That I didn't just swing with swing with last year's word. That I didn't just swing with last year's worship. That I spent time daily study in my word, that I spent time daily worshiping, that I was sharpening my axe so that when a new tree came down, I was able to cut it. Tonight, the last way that you can tell that your axe is dull is that you have injured someone or yourself. The last way that you can tell that your blade is dull is that someone was injured. You see, it is my prayer that in life that your axe does not get dull enough that you begin to hurt yourself or someone else. You see, as we were swinging those axe heads as hard as we possibly could at that piece of wood in Galveston, Texas, trying to have some friendly competition, I promise you, if you saw some of the ones that didn't stick and bounced off right back at us, that you would not ever want to go axe throwing. And so the harder and the more back those axes bounced, I began hearing my mom's voice echo in my head. And she says this all the time, that there is nothing more dangerous than a dull knife. There is nothing more dangerous than a dull blade. You see, the reason that our churches are not full, why we no longer hear of miraculous signs and wonders, why people church hop more than they ever have, is because there are a lot of dull axes in the church. You see, you used to never hear of church hurt before. But now 37% of those that stop attending church blame negative past experiences for the reason that they left the church. Proverbs 27:17 says this: iron sharpens iron, and one person sharpens another. You see, iron sharpens iron, but for one to sharpen the other, one of those must be sharp. Dull does not sharpen dull. If I had two axes and they were both dull and I just began beating them together, it would not help. One would not be sharp. To be able to have something sharp, one of them must have to be sharp. You see, there are a lot of Christians that have no business trying to sharpen others when they walk through this door because they are dull themselves. They have no business counseling. They have no business praying for them. They have no business teaching them, because when you go to swing dull, you risk injuring yourself and others. And that is what has happened in our church. That's why churches has been deemed irrelevant in our culture. It's because we got a lot of churches filled with dull axes, that when the new people come in, they're dull themselves, and we are swinging dull axes. You see, there isn't many times when God will send to a church someone with their axe sharp. Most of the time when someone opens the door for the first time, they are coming in with their axe dull. They will come in exhausted. They will come in defeated, beaten. Some may have even lost their axe head altogether in trying to cut down trees in their life. You see, those young men every day saw more and more men come into that school to learn from Elisha. Just as I pray that more and more souls come into this building. You see, they eventually said, hey, we've got too many people. Praise the Lord that there are so many people coming in. Guess what? We need to build a new building. You see, it wasn't just a few of them that went and down to build the building. It was every single one of those young men. You see, each and every one of you have an axe tonight. Each one of you have a responsibility for making room for each person that comes into this building. You see, I believe that once those young men chopped their trees down, that they found someone who was struggling and helped them. You see, I don't believe that the one man we read about in 2 Kings was the only one swinging a dull axe. But because his axe was dull, he placed not only himself, but he placed others in danger. You see, the axe head, when it came off, it could have lodged in him, and it could have lodged in others. You see, I believe that the axe head landing in the water without any injuries was the first miracle. Because we were never supposed to swing dull axes. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 12. I know you know this by heart. For the word of God is living and effective and sharper than any double-edged sword, penetrating as far as the separation of the soul and spirit, joints and marrow. It can judge the thoughts and the intentions of the heart. We were never supposed to swing dull axes because God gave us an instrument, and this instrument is not dull. It's sharper than any two-edged sword. So is your axe tonight sharp? As my wife comes to the piano, and you can start all standing across the room. Tonight I don't have a special altar call. But I believe tonight that God was telling us that we have to get sharper. That we have to get sharper for ourselves. We have to get sharper for our families. We have to get sharper for our marriages. We have to get sharper for our friends. And we have to get sharper for our church. For those in charge of different ministries, you have to get sharper for your ministry. Tonight, as Jess plays this song, I don't want anybody leaving this place, because right now is an opportunity for you to sharpen yourself, because you never know what trees or giants that you're going to have to cut down this week. You see, some of you didn't plan this week on losing your lights. Some of you didn't plan on losing all the food in your refrigerators. And that's expensive. I go grocery shopping. You see, there are things that you are going to face this week that when we come back Sunday and even Wednesday, that you're going to say, I had no idea that I was going to go through that. And so do not pass up tonight. Do not pass up this opportunity to sharpen yourself. You see, you do not want to be like the man that in the middle of his swinging away, that you lose your axe head. You see, after the man had lost his axe head, he panicked. He said, oh, what am I going to do? I didn't pay for this. I borrowed it. It's not mine. It's somebody else's. What am I going to do? How am I going to face the individual and say, I've lost his axe head? And he went to the only man that he knew could help. And he said, Elisha, I've lost my axe head. And Elisha said, where is it? And he pointed it out. He said, it's in the water. You see, I'm pretty sure there were other men that had seen this commotion. And when this man went over and he pointed, hey, my axe head's in the water, I'm pretty sure there were some men there that said, oh, you're not getting that back again. That iron sinks and the river's deep. But Elisha said, all right. And he took a piece of wood and he tossed it into the river. And that axe head floated to the top. You see, in this whole commotion, a man has lost his axe head. The other men have stopped and are watching what Elisha's going to do. Because of that, all work stopped. All progress stopped. You see, as long as him and the others had stopped working, the building wasn't being built. You see, some of you have made a lot of progress in your life. Some of you have made a lot of progress in your ministry. Don't let losing an axe head stop your progress. Don't let it stop because you decided to swing a dull axe. So tonight I invite everyone, altars are open. Don't pass this opportunity to sharpen your edge, to sharpen your axe. Nothing is guaranteed in this life. But I guarantee there are going to be times where you're going to face trees and giants. This is one of those opportunities where you can just sit and begin sharpen your knife. Because if you sharpen your knife, if you sharpen your axe, the rest of the day, guess what? You might not go through something. Then the next morning, guess what? You sharpen your axe again. The next morning, you sharpen your axe again. Because there's going to be one day that you're going to need to cut down a tree. And you won't have to worry if your axe is dull or not. That if you worry about sharpening your axe every single day, taking the time and the effort to sharpen it, it will always be sharp. Bow your heads with me.